Hi everyone, this is Ekam Singh from the Architecture Lobby. Very excited to be interviewing the Feminist Spatial Practices for the Biennale project. We are joined by Rhidi Chopra, Bryony Roberts, Renske Maria van Dam, and Abriannah Aiken. And I'll have them introduce themselves.
Hi all, my name is Rhidi Chopra. I'm originally from India, but currently I'm working as an architectural designer in New York.
Hey, my name is Renske Maria van Dam. I am a architect, spatial artist, and academic from the Netherlands.
Hi, I'm Bryony Roberts. I'm a designer, and artist, and educator based in Los Angeles.
And I'm Abriannah Aiken. I am an advocate designer in New York. I have a nonprofit called Architecture and Advocacy. And so Feminist Spatial Practices is a global collective of artists, architects, designers, and scholars that celebrate the diverse ways that people practice feminism in the built environment. And so we have some amazing workshops, a lecture series, projects, all to help foster a collective community of thinkers, advocates, and makers that really support each other and help share knowledge. And we recently just launched our web platform, which is also an archive. And really, we want to create a space of community empowerment.
And I'll
That's
just add
great.
that we define spatial practices really broadly to include any creative work in the built environment. So art, design, performance, architecture, planning, writing, curation. And feminism also we consider broadly to indicate practices that are, working on themes of gender, sexuality, and social equity, including practitioners of any background and gender identification.
Well, thank you again for this lovely introduction and also to giving us context. And I can jump into our first question that actually very much leads on from here about what have been the key moments in your journey as a designer, as an architectural worker, as a spatial practice and organizer.
So I think we could touch on sort of the origins of our
Mhm.
working together, which started when Avery and I started collaborating. We actually started teaching together at Columbia before this on reproductive justice. But we were invited by eFlux and the Jenks Foundation to create a visualization, a diagram showing the range of feminist spatial practices today. And we knew that this was ultimately needed to be a collective project. So we sort of contacted advisors to work on that initial phase, this diagram that was published in 2023. But we also issued an open call for people around the world to join together and create a community and also an interactive online platform. And from that, over 100 people responded, including these beautiful people, Rhidi and Renske. And we had a sort of collective project of building a series of programming and our online platform.
Yeah, and our community really is focused on resistance against oppression and patriarchal values within the profession and just the world in general right now, especially in these trying times. And we really want to create that space of community, a safe space of co-creation, and really imagining like what an intersectional feminist world could look like and help build it together.
That's wonderful. That actually sort of brings me to my next question in more ways than one. What are the challenges? Because when we say the word and when we use the word feminist spatial perspective and also just the larger context of the of our environment, what are some of the key problems that you've faced, and what do you think also the other practices and architectural workers, designers face?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two sides to this. On the one side, there's the project of kind of resisting barriers that exist within the profession. And on the other side is also offering imagination for what could be. So part of what we do with our programming is to point towards how feminist spatial practices offer new ways of making and knowing in the world. But a big part is also kind of resisting the problems that exist in the profession. And there's still so many barriers for people of all genders to thrive in architecture. There's so much entrenched misogyny and homophobia, and it really has an impact on opportunities for creativity and thriving professionally. So, people identifying as women are still expected to focus more on interiors in the domestic realm. They often face discrimination on construction sites. And there are huge issues with outdated gender expectations still, which are now being reinforced by our leadership in this country. And there's also really long-running issues with having a family and succeeding in both practice and academic realm of architecture. There's so little support for childcare in the United States, and it really makes it very difficult to, have your own practice and take on the kind of financial burden also of having a family. So there's a lot of systemic conditions in the US that make it very difficult to, sort of thrive as a person identifying as a woman. And especially, I think, if you want to also have a family and practice in architecture.
Yeah, and I think like one of the most alarming consequences of these systemic problems is that the way we talk and build about space, let's say our spatial intelligence, our collective spatial intelligence, is still based on core values of patriarchal, neocolonial, capitalist systems, or sustainable problem solving that keeps these ideologies in place. And I feel like that together with addressing inequity, family support, growing empowerment through this community building, it's extremely important to redefine concepts like space and building, reaching beyond physical space, reaching beyond the architectural objects, so including socio-political and environmental dimensions, which for me also means first-person experiences through co-creation to sensorial and participatory projects. And through that, also focus on new topologies and other spatial configurations that allow for building other relationships.
Yeah. Speaking of like building relationships, and also as someone who has attended a few of your events and seen how this platform has grown, what is the piece of advice that you would offer someone like who is interested in feminist spatial practices, but also in the larger context around organizing and building around issues that you're focused on? How would you like communicate to them?
I think my piece of advice would be that you don't have to do everything overnight. You don't have to change the world overnight. Most times, and for me specifically, it really starts with looking at the world and starting to question it, right? Questioning the way things are, looking at norms that are actually injustices and saying, hey, that's not okay. And once we begin to question those things, you can start to raise your voice and say that these are injustices, pointing them out for what they are. And by raising your voice, you start to find other folks that are feeling the same way, feeling that injustice, feeling like their questions aren't being answered. And so resistance to those norms, it can happen like very organically, very quietly. And once you start to connect with other people, that really starts to build a community. And that's really what happened here at Feminist Spatial Practices. So for those who acknowledge that we are in a world of injustice, you're already on the right track. You've started to question those things. And so now I encourage you all to find your people, build that community, really discuss and imagine and dream together what that might look like, and slowly plans for actualizing those dreams, from feminist futurescapes to reparative worlds, those can take shape through collective action. So I would just say, start by questioning, then building a community, and then dreaming together.
Yeah, I'd like to build on that. I completely agree. Questioning is truly essential. It's important to interrogate everything we hear, we learn, because a lot of our current opinions and beliefs are often shaped by so many external forces. It's also important to dig a little deeper and start from scratch. Like if you're trying to understand or address a social movement, like dissect it layer by layer, go back in time, read its history, study the movements that emerged around it, seek out different perspectives and have conversations to form our own opinions. And, with a full understanding of why these injustices exist and how resistance has taken shape over time. I also think it's crucial to recognize that these issues play out at different scales. For example, analyzing how feminism is understood in your local and national context versus on a global level. How do interpretations or struggles shift between the East and the West? the different meanings, solutions, and advocacy methods used across cultures, that they create like a pattern that can deepen your understanding. And recognizing these patterns not only expands your perspective, but also strengthens the way we can engage with these feminist spatial practices, to say.
One of the things that I think you all brought up is the idea of history, right? Like, and whenever I feel like we talk about history, I think the sort of counter to that is like, how do we look to the future? So, what do you think is the future of our discipline, our profession, from the perspective of FSP, and what is your hope for it?
So I can start. I think I see architecture as something that's beyond permanence. It exists in motion, in transition, shaping us through fleeting experiences, just as much as through built structures. These emotions that we attach throughout our lives, they don't only shape our identity, but they're also sort of an introduction to the injustices that embed in society. And I want the future of architecture to kind of recognize this, that space is just not physical, but also emotional and relational. Because if architecture can shape identity, it must also take responsibility of being inclusive. And too often spaces are designed for this narrow idea of who belongs, leaving many people feeling excluded, unsafe. And I guess I just want to see a future where architecture centers accessibility, gender equity, and care, where design doesn't just accommodate, but also affirms existence for people. And for me, this probably means continuously restructuring, reimagining, and reevaluating to create more of these equitable spaces.
Build on that, I think what we all might see as the future is a little bit daunting and scary at the current moment, but I think the dreams that we have are really exciting. So for me, I dream of a world that really centers around care and truly embodies what spatial justice might look like. It's a world where women have autonomy over their bodies, where glass ceilings don't exist because they've already been shattered. But beyond just women, it's a space where everyone feels valued and safe and loved. And we can't address feminism without thinking about trans rights, without thinking about how we end genocide, without thinking about a world where academic censorship is abolished and where reparations have been actualized. And so architecture needs to play a role in all of this in helping nurturing these imaginings. And we as architects, we need to work to co-create with communities a world where everyone has access to the things that they need, to basic assets and resources, to spaces where they can really thrive, and to really help create networks of care where people can do all of those things. And so I believe we can co-create that world as feminists, as designers, as advocates, but we really need to work together to actualize it.
And I'll just add that I think part of what's been so meaningful about being part of the community of feminist spatial practices is that it feels like a little microcosm of another future, another world, and one that's really built on an ethics of care. And I think a lot of us came together wanting to have a different way of working in this field. And so I would love for architecture to be about mutual support and empowerment rather than exploitation. And, you know, the field has been particularly notorious for sort of inhuman treatment of students, of employees, as the architecture lobby itself addresses. And this sort of culture of, you know, denying basic needs, I think is really damaging, and also makes it very inaccessible as a profession to people who are already facing precarity. And so I think architecture, there's another version of architecture that could really support the full humanity of everyone in a more generous, interdependent web. So that's my dream.
Yeah, I'm like with all of you and all of your answers. And for me, that's really expressed to like an architecture where space is approached through a diversity of experiences, which naturally also means through cross and inter and transdisciplinary projects, including artistic, activist, urban, and performative practices all together, where you indeed work together with local communities, but also for me, I would refer to this as a collaboration with the environment, which means that I kind of counter the image of like this single creative genius who is working behind the drawing table or behind the computer in an office, very distant from the places where the actual building is happening. And I sense that in our community, and also this is what I would aim for in the future, that the architect is actually someone who is like working collaboratively on site, attuned to changes and transformations there, and working towards vitalization of what is already there, social and ecological relationships. And when I'm thinking and I'm hearing us talking about the future, we have this is a story of hope, I was thinking. And it's a story of hope that, if you listen carefully, does also include and make space for the anger, the resistance, the pain that is there. It's not only a story of hope that just ignores all of this. It's a story where you try to work with it, and from there start to actually address a different kind of architectural practice. That's what I think we are working on, and also we will hopefully keep on working on in the future.
Well, if anyone just hears a story of hope, I think that is truly an inspiring thought, that what we're doing is a story of hope, indeed. And I think also, as you mentioned earlier, Bryony, the idea of community, and a lot of this project is about that, is building community, building connections, and having a project that actually lives on for a while that people can connect to, and also build those connections into larger context of the architectural community and the discipline. Well, that brings me to, unfortunately, the end of our little interaction for now. But I hope that you all keep in touch with the architecture lobby, and also build on this community that we are all a part of. And my deepest gratitude to Bryony Roberts, Rhidi Chopra, Renske Maria van Dam, and Abriannah Aiken for joining us. And thank you all for listening and also watching us as part of this project with the Architecture Lobby. And thank you, and organizing ahead. Thanks so much.